Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to welcome everyone here. This is the third final program that David Mann has been willing to do for us, and it's been very interesting along the way. This one is on the roads and bridges. And so I want to make sure everybody knows some people haven't been able to come to each one, but the two previous presentations, the Surveys and Surveyors Part 1 and 2, are available on youtube.com, so you can view them, and this one will be as well. Thank you to Rowlandson, who's been doing our filming. And so that's a great thing for us to have. And David has rejoined as a member of the Chesterfield Historical Society, and we are recruiting him to be a new board member. So anyway, it's nice to have Toni and David back in town, and he has a long history with Chesterfield Historical Society, and he and I have a long history of serving on some of the same boards in town. So it's nice having you back. So without any more, we'll go ahead and David will present. The other thing to mention, we do have maps. Some of you have seen them before you sat down. At the end, look at them, and I believe is it a silent auction we have going? Is that what it is on some of these maps? So you can bid and see if you can outbid your friend and if you can win the map. Go ahead, David, thank you.
I just turned on this microphone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. And you okay, Roland?
I think so. I'm not sure. You're not
okay.
You're not in focus.
This is our idea of what it might have looked like on the top of Wontostigit when Mary Rowlandson was there. For those of you that were here for the first presentation. And she spoke of wigwams that were made out of bark. There were two different types that we looked at. Some of them are elongated a little bit, and some of them are perfectly round. I think this one represents the Canadian ones, of where the St. Francis Indians were from. Ojibwe or something like that, I think it is. And but anyway, this is Toni's artwork. I talked her into doing it, and okay, next slide. This is my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandfather's name was James Athward Mann, and I have a brother-in-law who's a little bit of a they live in Alabama, and my family's from Alabama. But my brother-in-law said to my grandfather one time, he said, "You're lucky that your mama didn't name you Back." And so that's the back part of that. And when I was little, I used to crawl up on my grandfather's lap, and he was always whittling and on the front porch. He was a sharecrop farmer, which is about a half a step above being a slave. But he whittled cedar all the time. And I'd go climb up in his lap, and it always smelled so good, this red cedar, when he was whittling. And I asked him, what are you making? And he said, "I'm making this stick smaller." And then in the end, then I said, "Well, what's it going to be?" And he said, "It's going to be a toothpick." And then he looked at me and he smiled, his big toothless smile. He had no teeth for a toothpick. And he thought that was just as funny as could be. And then my grandma, they both always had a big chunk of tobacco in their mouth, and they had snuff put down any place where they could stuff it. And my grandmother would come over, and when we would come, she would just grab you and she'd give you this big kiss, and you'd have this big dripping thing of tobacco on your side of your cheek. And but when my same brother-in-law and my grandpa were driving down the road, and my grandfather said, "Where does this road go?" And my brother-in-law said, "I don't rightly know." And my grandmother said, "It don't go nowhere. It's just laying right there." Next slide. Oops. I put this in there. I ran into it when I was looking for things. But in 1986, me and my employees entered this contest for the National Peace Garden in Washington, D.C. There's an island there, and they put this out. And we did this as an entry, and we sent it down, but we didn't win. But that's representing the hands, and the idea was, it was a Jim Maloney idea, if you know Jim Maloney. But he had a thing drawn with the hands and it releasing a white dove. And we could relate the hands pretty good, but it was hard to relate the white dove. And there were restrictions on where you could do things. It would have been okay if out in that circular area we could have made it look like a white dove, but they wouldn't let us do that. Anyway, that's enough a diversion off of topic. I did some more work on Mary Rowlandson, which is also off topic, but I just wanted to tell you what I found. I called the Lancaster Historical Society, and they said that they had some information for me, which they were good enough to send to me. What is that? Scan reminder. Next slide. But in the previous presentation in April, I had this map, and I found this map in a subsequent history of Lancaster, but it didn't give any credits of where it had come from, and so I kind of kept looking. And then next slide, please. I found the lady from Lancaster Historical Society sent me this booklet, which goes through the whole captivity, her trek from where she was captured and taken up to Chesterfield and then taken back to Lancaster. Well, actually not back to Lancaster, it was back to Princeton, Massachusetts. And this little booklet's available, and so if there are people here that are interested in the Mary Rowlandson story and want a copy of that, I can send it to you. Or I'll give it to somebody and they can post it on the website. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it is actually online. You can actually call it up online. I did a story on her. So if you want to give it to me,
okay.
I can attach it to the story.
I never found this one online. This is not her story about her captivity. This is this guy Henry Norse's review, and then he made that map to go with it.
Okay, then you send it to me, I can put it on.
Okay, next slide. So we went down to Princeton, where we had been traveling down to see my son down in Northbridge, Massachusetts, and we traveled down 140, and we'd been going by this place called Redemption Trail and Redemption Rock. And I wanted to stop there sometime. I didn't know what it was. And I had gone through the whole Mary Rowlandson story and everything. I still didn't know that this had to do anything with her. And then somehow I figured out, I found that Redemption Rock sign in something, and I said, oh, you know, and so then for my birthday, we went there, and I met my son there, and so that's the rock, Redemption Rock. They built, it said in the some of the writings that the Indians built a wigwam that would seat 100 people. That's a big, big building, and somewhere near this rock. And it says King Philip was there. But King Philip didn't, refused his consent, but he didn't block her return. And so the whole thing happened, and she was returned to her family. And that's what I've found out about that. Next slide. Communiques at Fort Dummer. There's many letters and journals by the commanders and by certain soldiers at the fort at Fort Dummer. And next slide. And this is one of them, but there are many of them, and it's really, the handwriting's really hard to read, and sometimes you get those tattered sections where pieces are missing. But I think within these, I've found little notations that lead you to know that this guy went through Chesterfield in 1724. And so it's just interesting if you can find them. I don't know how many of these there are. Next slide. This one I did transcribe, but I didn't put it here. Both of these things were things that Dave Allen gave me, and I think he got them from Mass Archives. Anyway, that's something that I guess the Historical Society might want to do, or put on some back burner to do sometime. Next. River Road Corridor and Woontasticate Mountain. This kind of is partly road, partly military, but it all has to do with the use of a certain area, a corridor through Chesterfield, that was used by both the English and the French and Indians to access and get at each other. So next slide. This is the this one's listed as the 1761 Blanchard-Langdon map. I think Joe Blanchard, he died in 1758, I think, or somewhere about there. And he started this map in 1756. But I think it was a work in progress, you know. And in the New Hampshire state papers, there's lots of references to the grand plan for the lotting of these townships. And though it never says in there that it definitely connects it to the Blanchard plan, I think that this is the grand plan. And as they were adding towns, this one has them handwritten on it. There are several different versions of this plan that are slightly different. I want to spend some time and see how many of them I can find that are different. They're mostly available from the Library of Congress. And anyway, next slide. Yeah. That's right. My secondary memory here. The river road is shown on this map. Get my pointer. Yes, ma'am. There we go. Now you're in trouble. There's the river road coming up through Chesterfield right there. So in 1756 to 61, depending, at least by 61, this road was there, but I think it was before that, you know, in 1756. And maybe even before that, because this road supported Fort Number 4 up here. So troops and supplies either came up the river when that was available, or came along this road that ran along the river here. Next slide. Captain Joseph Kellogg was a commander at Fort Dummer for a while, and he sent out soldiers to do as scouts. And in this section here from the Northfield history, the 5th, the men were sent on West River Mountain. That's another name. The English called it West River Mountain, but locally we call it Wantasticate. And there to look, to lodge on the top and view morning and evening for smokes. Smokes is spelled S-M-O-A-K-S, but I know what he means. And so they were watching. I don't think this is the kind of smokes that you saw in F Troop, where they were sending smoke signals. I think it's more the kind where, you know, they might have camped and they had campfires and they could see that the French and Indians were coming across Vermont. Next one. River Road existed many years before Chesterfield was settled, you have different maps that show the road passing up this side of Wantasticate, and others that show it coming on this side. And I don't think either one of those are exclusive. You know, both things probably happened. And but coming up this side seems a little more practical as far as these slopes here are killer. And so anyway, that's something that I've been exploring. My ability to get out and roam around in the woods now is a little bit tainted by fear that I might fall down or I might get lost, so I still like to do it though. But here they're talking about a French force that came down from Canada, and they know enough about it that they knew everything. That they had 80 pairs of mittens, 100 deer skins, 8 pounds of vermilion. I don't know what that would have been used for. 80 breech clouts. And anyway, but this force headed directly for the Connecticut Valley and took a position on the highlands eastward of Fort Dummer. Fort Dummer was right in there, so they were up here on Wantasticate. Wantasticate was useful in that there's a pond there, so if you positioned some men there, there was a water supply. Next slide. Remaining prisoners were conducted up the east side of the river 2 or 3 miles above the mouth of West River, where they crossed at a place called Catsbane. Mm-hmm. This would have been right near the Titus house, I believe. Mm-hmm. And but the Catsbane is a term I think they used more for the brook there's a little island there called Catsbane as well. But I think it might have been became a regional spot, you know, but that's just my feeling. Next slide. This map shows it as Cat's Bone Brook, but it doesn't show the brook. And, but I think that's, this is the 1753 Douglas Plan. And the towns here in our towns, and us and the ones around us are drawn in. I don't know where they got this information from, but you know, the information in 1753 on all of these towns was available, and but they couldn't have had it when they drew this up. Next. This is just, I went back and reviewed in the town history. This is Randall's talking about the Catsbane and how he definitely believed that they were referring to the island, and that he think the Indians even crossed the island. And then he also gives us a little story about how it got named in the town history. I'm sure some people have read this, but these two hunters or soldiers were had lunch by the brook, and one of them said, "I'm going to get another draft of water from the brook," and for your sake, his companion, prefacing his sentence with one of those exclamatory phrases, much used even at the present day, "I wish this water had cat's bane in it." He probably meant rat's bane. I guess the cat's, I did a little research on cat's bane and rat's bane. Rat's bane's a little flower, and it's used medicinally. And that makes more sense to me, I agree. Cat's bane is a poisonous plant. So I guess he was wishing that his friend would eat some cat's bane and die, I guess. And next. My belief that the river road, or the general area through which it passes, is, in some respects, was a military corridor, as it was utilized by both the French and Indians to carry their spoils of war and prisoners back to Canada. The English utilized it to communicate from the Mohawk Trail near Northfield north towards Fort Hinsdale and continue up the east side of the Connecticut River to Fort No. 4. Eventually, and then there was a road built from the Merrimack River westerly to Fort No. 4. Those two roads combined and supported a road that the English built in 1759 across Vermont called the Crown Point Road. And that was what opened up the Lake Champlain area and Lake George and everything to the British, and that within a few years they captured Quebec. And it was a lot due to that road and being able to get men and equipment through to where the war was. Next. Chesterfield Town Roads. Now we're more on topic, I think. And this is one road that I ran into on the what's available online is the town reports are available from 1860 to current day. The earlier ones in 1860, there's I think 3 or 4 years during the Civil War that they didn't publish, so they're not available. But in that, I found references to a road. Oh, I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. This is still about the river road. When the first road accepted, in these transcribed records, they use accepted right there. And I'm accept and accept has always confused me a little bit, and I think it did them too. But they're talking about the river road in this town record. This is the warrant, and they voted to accept a bunch of roads, 7 of them, and the river road is the first one, and it says accept a road from Westmoreland line, the river road to Hinsdale. So the other ones are described in such a way that they were roads that weren't there, but that road is described as a road that was there. And, okay, next slide. The 6th road is one that I've been working on, and it kind of is a little confusing, but I think I figured it out, but I'll talk about that in some future date when I'm sure I figured it out. Next slide. This is the one I was talking about. And the first thing that got me going on this was that right there, G.H. Goodrich for surveying road. This is from miscellaneous expenses in the town report from 1861. And he was paid $1.50 for surveying this section of road. So I went to the layouts. These are available from the archives. And I looked at the roads during that period, and this was the only one that fit for that time period. Again, these are the transcribed records. The original town records are in the town hall. And it would be good to go to this period of time and read that. You could probably correlate the layout to Mr. Goodrich more definitively if you were able to look at probably before the actual layout or after the actual layout, there's probably references to him and how it was done and how it was paid for and all that kind of stuff. But there's many of these that you could tie together the payment for the survey and the actual road description and where it is. This one I figured out that it runs from the old Clark Place up on Streeter Hill Road and down around by Orrin Randall's place. Anybody know what I mean by that? And it probably created that more of a sweeping curve in that road right there. Next slide. Brooklyn Bridge. I think I got this date wrong. I looked up the date for the Brooklyn Bridge and they said 1883, but then I was listening to another gentleman that talks about this kind of stuff that we'll get into later, and he said it was 1869. I'll have to go check that, but at any rate, it predates our bridge, the suspension bridge, and it became very popular, this bridge. This is a Currier and Ives print that was widely circulated, and the local bridge, iron bridge company, Berlin Iron Bridge, built many bridges with this type of design in it from 1883 all the way up through, and Chesterfield was one of them. Next, and that's the one in Chesterfield. These pictures that I have, I went to the Brattleboro Historical Society, and they were nice enough to sit me down at a table and gave me their file on photographs of the suspension bridge. I think there's more to be gleaned over there than what I found, but I did what I had time enough to do. And next slide. This is the town report, and it's for the meeting on March 1st, 1888. and Article 11, to see if the town will vote to choose a committee to make an investigation in relation to building a free bridge, I accent the free bridge across the Connecticut River near the foot of the Gulf Road, so-called, or act thereon. At the current time when this was written, if you wanted to go to Brattleboro, you either had to go up to Norcross Landing to Norcross Ferry, or the next ferry up. I don't remember who ran that one. But there were 2 ferries across, so you'd have to go up and go across the ferry and then come back down. The other option was to come down the Gulf Road and go south on the mountain road. And the mountain road was treacherous, so they say. And then you could go over the mountain road and come down to Hinsdale, where the little bridge was, the Little River Bridge, it was called. And then on the island, there was a toll booth. And then you paid a toll to go over the big bridge into Brattleboro. And I guess it was dangerous and expensive. So the that free bridge coming out in there was an enticement to get the people to vote for what they wanted to do. Next. This is the 1889 town report. And this is kind of funny, this one. To see if the town will vote to build the road as laid out by the selectmen, beginning on the old Gulf Road near the butternut tree, thence westerly to the new iron-free bridge, or raise the money to do the same. And so it's funny, but here's the reference to the surveyor. T.N. Robertson was paid $1.50 for surveying the road to the highlighter blocked out suspension bridge. And $1.50, I figured out from looking at hundreds of these things, meant that it took him a half day. He got $3 for a day's worth of surveying. Next slide. This is more in the I think this one's still 1889. The end of it, but in July, or O.E. Randall, who I presume is our history writer, got paid for surveying the bridge. So somehow he was involved in surveying the bridge. T.N. Robertson was the one that was surveying the road to the bridge. And then here's a payment of $3,500 to the Berlin Iron Bridge Company. I figured out that Brattleboro and Chesterfield partnered on the building of the bridge. The bridge cost $12,500 to build. Chesterfield agreed to pay $8,000, and Brattleboro agreed to pay $4,500. So the $3,500, I assume, is one installment. During this period of time as well, it was hard to tell exactly what was going on from what is just available in the town report, but there was some money borrowed from the Greenfield Savings Bank and stuff that I think may have been associated with building the bridge. Next. This is the actual layout where it was petitioned to the town meeting and it was accepted. And this is the layout that was accepted. Next. And then on June 4th, 1889, this was the scene at the newly built bridge. The bicycle people seem to be there in force. And, but there are several versions of this this picture, and they've been, this is the one from the Historical Society file, but I've seen them in calendars in different places, and they're online, and I think there may have been a postcard done of this as well. But I don't know if you looked at all of them, whether there are different versions of it, that you take more than one photograph or just the one. And anyway, you can see the cables coming down, and there would have been a block down here that these cables would have hooked into. There's a bridge very similar to this that still exists in Milford. If you go over to Bridge Street in Milford, there's a little parking lot there, and you can walk out across this bridge. It's much narrower. It's just a pedestrian bridge, and it was made to bring workers from one side of the river to the cotton mill on the other side. And and it has a plaque on the on it. The plaque is much more ornate than the one that you can't read it, what's on here, but it seems more ornate. Need a drink. Yes, sir.
Is this located pretty much where the present bridge is? Or not?
I'll get to that in a little bit. I drew up a map that shows all three bridges and how they're positioned.
Is this the Vermont side or the Hampshire side of the same?
Hold on.
People are gathered.
What was that?
Is this the New Hampshire or Vermont side where the people are gathered?
I believe this is the Vermont side. However, I say that, and I'm judging that by the flatness on the other side, because on the Vermont side, beyond these cables, there was a ledge that rose up. Next slide. Again, these are all views from the Brattleboro Historical Society, but there's the bridge in use. This is the Brattleboro side where it takes this sharp bend. And this one here we're at a period of time prior to 1909 when this picture was taken. Because the Vernon Dam was built in 1909 and the water level would have been up here somewhere after that. Next slide. The bridge was popular, and there were lots of photographs taken, and you can find dozens of different postcards with it on it. And this is just one that I ran into online. One young lady writing to another one. And I didn't try to see what they were talking about, but next slide. Oh, one thing about that last one, you don't have to go back. It says on it, the suspension bridge at Brattleboro, Vermont. And most of the postcards credit Brattleboro for the suspension bridge. You don't often find one that says Chesterfield. I don't think I've ever found one. Suspension bridge across Connecticut River. And you can see here the water level being higher. And exactly how much it raised the water is one of my, years ago I was doing a survey for the retreat in Brattleboro, and I had to figure out where there's a setback area there that's flooded with water, and originally there were gates in it that allowed the retreat farm to keep the water out of there until they had mowed the hay. And then they had to open the locks and let the water come in and flood their fields. And then And then, of course, the locks long ago stopped operating, and it's just been open to the water the way it is now, to the ice fishermen in the wintertime. And, but there's that, and the survey that I found of that lock system and that whole thing was from 1906. And in 1906, they did a whole survey all the way up the river, and they determined how all of the properties would be affected by that dam. And then they bought flowage rights all the way up the river. There's a map somewhere, and it's in, we found the one that we found was in Bellows Falls at the people who managed the dams there had copies of the old plans, but I've never gone back to try to find the one that would cover the area of Chesterfield. Next slide. This is 1928. There's the suspension bridge. Here's, this is them taking this bend. This is the Gulf Road here, and this is the Mountain Road. The intersection had to have been quite different than what we see there today. And, but the road that was laid out in those earlier reports from the Gulf to the bridge, this is the road that was being laid out. And right here we'll see later that this was a little, I'll say a store and some gas pumps that come in about this time because of the car.
Now the river goes up and down on the left-hand side?
The river runs up and down on this side, and they don't show it on this map because this map has to do with building the road we know and love today, that the approach to the bridge coming straight down the hill right there. I don't know what...
That's a different bridge.
What's that?
That's the bridge you have where the bridge is now?
This is the suspension bridge right here.
Yeah.
And if you, prior to this road, or even at this point in time, if you were driving your Model A or T, you would come down here and you had to go to the right, go down this way, and come around here and go up. And this road right here is still, parts of it are still there. I surveyed this part. This part is gone. And this part of this is still there. And, but the Area 51 fireworks boutique is right there. It wasn't, there was no, well, 1828, it would have been Route 9. Yeah, it would have been old Route 9. The New England Road Marking System was established in 1922, which established Route 9. The original marks for the highways, this is the marking system that was required. And this is what the road signs looked like at that period of time. And they were, it says they're usually painted on a telephone pole. And then where they wasn't, they had signs, I presume. And this down here, in case this thing here is showing you the grade of this road, that you would come up, and then they cut the hill right in here, and they probably tried to equalize what they were taking out of there to fill in that area there, and that's how the road goes today. Next. In the 1930s, there was a dispute between New Hampshire and Vermont on the boundary. Vermont claimed to the center of the river, and New Hampshire claimed to the top of bank on the west side of the river. And this was in court for several years, but was finally settled in 1937. And while all of this was going on, in the middle of it, we had the flood of 36, and which had dire consequences on the suspension bridge. And right here, there's a note, says suspension bridge carried away by flood, March 19th, 1936. Boundary reference monument 8 not disturbed. This is a picture I took of the boundary reference mark. It's still there today. It's down below the 37 bridge. I think that was all I wanted to get out of this. Okay, next. So that brings us up into that time period. This is the picture from Brattleboro Historical Society with the ice up underneath the bridge. I found 2 references to the ice coming up like this on that bridge. One of them happened earlier, and in 1904, I believe. But I was doing research for something else at the time when I found it, and I didn't have it in mind that I'm going to be doing what I was doing now, so I didn't write down where I read that, and of course mind fails. So I was never able to find that reference again, but in that, what I remember it saying was that when the ice came up, it lifted the bridge off of the foundation, and then the road crews from both Brattleboro and Chesterfield worked to free the bridge from the ice. And apparently they did, because it lasted a lot longer. Next slide. This is in 1921. I tried to keep these in a chronological order, but this one I slipped out of order for some reasons, because it all has to do with the bridge failing. But here on the Chesterfield end of the bridge, the foundation was made out of stone, and that stonework started to fail. And this Storrs Bridge engineers came up with this plan to shore up the stonework on this side, and they put in this reinforced concrete buttress here, or cladding on that abutment. That's what it looks like in view. And then these are different views of that abutment from different, one side, frontal, and the other side. Next. In the at the state level, there's the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources, and they have this list of highway bridges on the Connecticut River between Vermont and New Hampshire by 1906, with notes and later spans. And what that means is, in here, this part is about the suspension bridge. This one is about the 1937 bridge. And then this one down here is about the new bridge that was just built in 2001. But in here, it says that last plan was by Storrs engineers, but they make a comment in here. Storrs made a number of photographs of the suspension bridge and its stone abutments in 1922. And that would have been when they were doing the work to shore up that one abutment. So I believe that there's probably photographs at the state level somewhere or in a private hands that we could probably get copies of if we could find them. And then also in here they mention that the bridge was built by the Berlin Iron Bridge Company. They're from Berlin, Connecticut. And I looked them up and they went out of business, and they were bought up by another big bridge company. And I found out that their records, be they just financial records or you know, the records of plans and stuff of all the bridges they built, went to the Connecticut State Historical Society. And, so there may be stuff there as well. There's also a reference in here about the Berlin Bridge Company, and it says Volume 1, Number 7, October 1898. I don't know what that means. Apparently there's some volume of books that has some information in it, but I don't know what it is. But then in here also they talk about in the 36 flood that they salvaged the cables from the suspension bridge and they took them to another bridge, the McGregor Bridge in Manchester, that also went down in the flood. And they used the cables from the Chesterfield suspension bridge to build a footbridge across the Merrimack River so that the workers could get to the factories back and forth there. So it was a temporary arrangement until the other bridge, a new bridge got built there. So I don't know, I went over there, and this is a picture of an abutment that is across the river, right in that location. I don't know if that's the footbridge, but there are two other pieces of abutment there. But if I spent more time with the Manchester folks, I could probably figure that out and which one is that, and maybe even get a picture of the Chesterfield cables in action over the Merrimack. Okay, this is the end. I mean, of the suspension bridge. The end. There's a house here. You don't usually see a house floating down the river. And there's the cables that I was just talking about. But the whole thing went that way, I believe, downstream. Next. This is the design for the new bridge as far as the plan view. There was ledge on the Vermont side, so they were just going to pin into the ledge. On this side, they had to pour a concrete foundation for the bridge and put in piles to hold it. And that's where the 1937 bridge was built. And this is the suspension bridge in relation, the question you asked about. And then if you look here, you can see the gas pumps right there and the little store. And then that road was still there to go that way, out to the Gulf Road. They moved this road as part of the 1983 highway project, I think. Next. This is a picture, again from Brattleboro Historical Society, of the 37 bridge being built. And in the background, you can see this. I think this is a temporary bridge built for construction purposes. And it just based on where it's at and what's going on, it looks like they built it off of the existing abutment from the suspension bridge. And in the background, you can see the gas pumps and the little building right there. And next slide. And then this is a picture at the end of the 37 bridge, and it won an award in 1937 for the most beautiful bridge in its class, Class C. And more work could be done on that institution, the American Institute of Steel Construction, to see what that was and what the entries were and all that kind of stuff. There's a little bit of history that could be gleaned out of that. And the other plaque is for Harlan Fiske Stone. Next. And that brings us to the construction of our new bridge. And this was during construction. I think this came from the Brattleboro Historical Society as well. Next. And that's a picture that I liked. And next one. And this
And
is
Fritz.
this is the guy that I was talking about that said the Brooklyn Bridge was opened in 1869, and he's probably right, and I'm probably wrong. So he's got paid researchers working for him. And but if you Google Connecticut River bridges, Fritz talking about Connecticut River bridges, you can watch the little thing, Chronicle event. It's interesting. Next. Now, so we've got, we're going backwards now. We went through the bridge. Now we're back on the highway. And in 28, we had that section of road that brought you up the hill built, which is, I presume, is about 1,000 feet of road. But in 1941, they had these federal and aid secondary road funding, and Route 9, as it was called, was upgraded at that point. And I don't know why they did it out of sequence, but this is the first section that was done. This is the old Welcome Farm in there somewhere. This is Cobley Corner. Anybody know where those are? Mm-hmm. And this is that curve that we go around right there. And that was built new in 1941, came down. It bypassed this little bend here by, I can't remember his name's house. And then we get down to the brook. What's this brook called? Hubbard Brook, or it's one of the feeder streams of the Catsbane, I think. I don't know if it's the Catsbane here or not. And then it came along and it bypassed this section of the road. This goes down past a little house there, and the road's still there, and they use it as a driveway and a feeder road. And then there's that open field that Bo Ford owns right in there. And then this is the section of the road that came up through Dave Smith and Norm Smith's land, and then to the intersection at Stage Road and Poor Road, the way it was before they separated them. And then it came up Stoddard Hill. Anybody know what Stoddard Hill is? And then before this road was built, it used to loop out, and that road is still mostly there, pretty grown up. And that's between, there's a couple little houses there, I think, and on this side it's Dudek. And you come up, and then there's a little bloop of the road that was done away with, and then you get to here, and this is the Brattleboro Road that goes up by the dump. And they cut the road over this way, and this used to have a little ville on it right in here. I can't remember. Larry Taylor, you know Larry Taylor, mm-hmm. Anybody? Mm-hmm. And he used to talk, whenever I talk about this area, he'd call it something, and I can't remember what it was.
Caryville.
Caryville? Yeah, that sounds right. But so it bypasses Caryville, and then comes more or less where the old road was, down to the Route 63 and the Stone House. Next slide. I didn't have any place to put this, so I put it here. But This is the history of the New Hampshire Highway Department. From 1905 to 1915, the responsibility of the highways were vested with the state engineer. And during that period of time, if you study the records of how Chesterfield spent its money and how the road management grew in those things, you end up with no road agents to having 5 of them, and or I think it settled in at about 4. One of which was Roger Spalding, who used to live right over here where the library is. And Roger gave me, I'd say he gave it to me. I think he did give it to, I don't know. Roger wanted money for anything, so I probably paid him something for it. But he had this what's called a brush scythe. And he said, in his later years, he said he went to work for the state, and he cleared brush along the highway, and it was used to do what the tractors do now. They had 5 or 6 of these men out there cutting stuff down, and it's a short-bladed scythe that could cut down wood, small wood, you know. Probably if you were good with it, you could cut down a 1-inch sapling. I was never that good with it. So this one's 1942, and this one's beginning at about 1,000 feet from the river. And then it comes up, and it doesn't really follow the old road anywhere. They build a whole new road through here, and this is the part that runs up through on the other side of the cemetery. That's the cemetery right there. And then Chesterfield Inn is right over here. And then the new road passing off that way. And of course, Welcome Hill Road is in here somewhere. So that's 1942. Next slide. This is 1953. And in 1953, prior to that, if you were traveling, you would have made the route around the lake here and back through Spofford Village and back out to the highway here. And then in 53, they laid out this road through here. And it almost, there isn't any existing road. It crosses a few, but there's no existing roads on it. So it was a whole new bypass of the lake and the village. And so after 53, I don't know how long it was in construction, but after that period of time, this is where you would travel. And this is where I've always traveled. I don't remember this road ever not being there, because I was 1, and I lived in Virginia. Okay, next slide. And this is 1954, and this is the last part of it, where we, this one's bad, and but it's what I had. But this is a section that goes out around by, there's Roble Road, and where the old farm stand used to be, and the new, what's that called? Curiosity? No. That. Serendipity? No. That little store that the lady built there. And then this is where it goes out around and hooks to Glebe Road, and Forest Avenue is there. I think it's called Sugar Maple Road. And then it comes in the current location up through here, and then prior to this date you would have been going around Katy Lane and down into Keene that way. And that was bypassed for this new road that went up over the mountain, clipped the corner of Westmoreland the way it does today. Next slide. In 1983, there was a wholesale reconstruction of the Route 9 all the way through Chesterfield. I didn't get too much into that as far as what we're doing, but there's the cabins, the way it looked before, and there's not really much evidence of the old Gulf Road in this area, but you can still kind of see where it might have been through there. Of course, now it's all really different. Next. This is the plan I put together that shows the suspension bridge, the 37 arch bridge, and the 2001 arch bridge. The dates, this is construction date. 2001, I think I took off of the plans for the thing. I think it was the completion of this was sometime in 2003. And but that's how both. Oh, and I forgot to say on that other plan when they were building the 37 bridge, it said that they took down the abutments for the suspension bridge. I went out there and I spent part of a day looking around trying to find some remnant of this bridge, and then I noticed on that plan it said that they wrecked the foundation and used the stonework in it for riprap for the new bridge. So. Okay. Next. Base plan and overlays. I spent some time on this. I hoped to come up with something a little more finished and fancy, but I'm not there yet. But this is what I found by taking the original layout of Arlington, which becomes Winchester and Hinsdale. And the extremities of it, I show them on here correctly the way they were shown in 1733. This little no man's land in between here, I didn't get into, but it turns out to be, there's a big overlap in there. But if you look at Chesterfield, when I put it in by what those dimensions tell me, it's much wider than what it really is. And so, next slide. I took some later dimensions, especially on this line here, that I used to reconstruct it. These line and this line are parallel in both descriptions, but this one here, there's a lot of conflicting evidence in it. And the right in here, I have a dashed line right there that would reflect one of the different views of where the eastbound to Chesterfield would be, and the other one is right here. So there's a little triangle in there that appears to be kind of a dispute. Next slide. Oh, I used those as overlays for these next slides, and in parts of them. This is the 1733 map of Keene, and Keene explains our little nook in the northeast corner, and it comes off of that. And I laid in the courses and distances given on this plan, and I overlaid it on top of this, and the lines are faint. You probably can't see them very well, but it follows the plan very well. However, on the plan, it shows a tree here that they carved their initials into, but it's not the corner. And there's also one up here on the line, also carved into, that's not the corner. And where the corner is, it doesn't call for anything. And what I finally came to believe is this is that discrepancy. And this is what they were told to do. This was their job, make a 6-mile square township. That's 23,040 square feet. Well, if you go to those trees right there, you get 20,800. But if you add that little piece on, you get to 23,255. So I think when they did the initial survey and did all their marking, they thought this was going to be Keene. But then when he got back and got it on paper and realized it wasn't big enough, he bumped it out this way and added enough to it to get it up above the 6 miles square. Next slide. This is the 1736 plan that created the predecessor, number 1, of Chesterfield. This being township number 1 right here, and which somebody on the original plan, somebody penciled in Chesterfield, I believe. And but I took that, the initial base overlay I did that showed Chesterfield wider, and when I put that in on here, you can see kind of a little double lining there. I put it in on this line, but it lines up ever so good with that plan. So it appears as though whenever they did this plan, they were using that dimension that made this longer by quite a bit. And the other ones, the parts of them line in pretty well, but there was something wrong with where they thought the river was over here, and Arlington and Lower Ashwell, it ended up overlapping each other by quite a little. And next, this is that 1761 plan from the beginning that was Blanchard's plan. And this is what Chesterfield looked like on there. And I have laid in there the second one where I had corrected the width of Chesterfield, and I laid it in there, and it lays in over what Blanchard had there pretty well, excepting that there's a faint line over here that is where the river actually is. So his location of the river over here, it's really over there. I've found a lot of maps with corrections of the river in this location. Anyway, next one. This is Chesterfield's 1805 map. And I overlaid all of these towns with the second corrected base map. And it overlays the 1805 map rather well.
You can hear me?
And it goes to the easterlymost
So I'm
line
stepping outside.
with respect to Swansea.
So what's up?
Lower Ashwell is
Yeah?
Swansea. Does everybody know what these towns are? Lower Ashwell was Swansea, Upper Ashwell is Keene, and Arlington was Winchester and Hinsdale. But there was one funny little thing I found is it appears as though they show an angle point I assume that by 1805, Winchester and Hinsdale existed, and it's almost like they're showing
So,
a
Jim,
angle
press
point
1 and
at
see
that
what it
town
says.
line, but I haven't
Yeah, well,
explored
can you
that
press
yet
1?
to know
Or is
why
it's
there is
it's already
an angle
gone?
point there. And, or if there is.
So
The
it
copy
might
of the plan I
be-
have could well
Fall
have a
Mountain
deformity
usually
in it
does
or
it that
something that
way.
causes me to
Anyway,
think that, you know, it may
I'm not
not.
going to worry about it. So the program
really
is
be that
nearing
way.
the end, but not quite.
And a lot of information on these
So
plans,
there,
it
I
was
can't do
really hard to
anything
read.
about it from
They
here.
were written with a quill pen
Did Trav come up?
and rather
So I
difficult
think
to
he's
read.
going to. He texted me
next
and I
one.
replied back that the check was there and you were
This is the
expecting him to come,
1858
so-
map. North-south, the lines look real good.
Well,
We line right up. The east
okay,
line, though,
and he will
the
know.
1858 map
You've got the lights on
is
in the
on that
kitchen.
inside
All right.
line
Okay.
in here, which leaves this discrepancy here. Next.
I don't have any of your pills ready, but I'll get them
And,
ready. I don't know if it'll be a problem waking you up to bring them in
1824.
the room, but
There was a court case
to fill your little
on
main
a
pack.
dispute between Swansea
Did you get your
and
I haven't got your
Chesterfield over
bedtime
that
pills
line.
out. Did you get them?
That was settled.
You
And
need
I
to do
think
them.
that my, you know, the
right.
things that I see there, that probably is
Bye-bye.
part of how this happened. And next. This is 1893. These are the first USGS maps. This is 1893 for Brattleboro, 1898 for Keene. I mean, it's the Keene quad, but for Chesterfield. I put them together and made this composite of Chesterfield, and then I laid in my overlay on the lines, and it fits almost perfectly. So there you go. That's good. This is a road map I did of Chesterfield for the 911 naming, I'll call it. I remember being at a meeting, I think it was in there, and with Alvin Davis and the selectmen. And I had this map in front of us, and we were going around and checking all of the road names, and then we changed some of the road names because you weren't allowed to have any kind of a similar or duplicate naming in any way. So there were lots of roads that we renamed, and some of them we used some historical component or somebody's name that we knew or something to change them. But I remember right here there was a road that was the selectmen called it the Brown Road because the people that lived out there was were name was Brown. So they called that the Brown Road, and that became, on this plan, it's shown as the Brown Road. That road is the road that we saw on that old map where the old Route 9 wound down around the hill. That was that Brown Road. And then across the way, I had drawn in a road. It was not only town roads that you had to put on this map, it was other feeder roads, private roads, and that kind of stuff. And I had drawn in a road across there that leads down to some cottages on the river, and it's called Red Road today. But the only reason it's called Red Road is because I drew it in on red on that plan, and nobody could think of a name to call it. So somebody said, "Just call it Red Road," because we kept saying the Red Road, the Red Road. So that's what it ended up being named. Next, I think that's it. I wanted to thank Toni and Dave Allen. And it seemed funny writing David Allen. I've never done that before. And Jay Morris, who's sitting here. He did some research for me. And then all of these other folks that I got information from either nefariously or by actual grant. By nefarious, I mean it was on the internet, and it's free game.
When you mentioned that those plans or overlays are available over there.
Oh, yeah, right. There's some copies of those overlays over there. I only brought 5 of them, but if you wanted one, they're over there, and I would ask for a little bit of money to pay for the printing. And then I guess one other thing I wanted to say that happened, and I was going to put a slide in here, but I was afraid I might run over, was on the sheepskin, there was an envelope that it came in, and Carol told me about the envelope. And then we got a copy of it, and I was trying to find out if there was some clue about how the sheepskin came to us and where it came from. And so I looked at the postmark on that envelope. You know, it's like an 8x10 envelope. And it was kind of hard to read, but I took some photographs of it, and then we finally figured out, oh, it says Philadelphia, PA. So that envelope came in the mail from Philadelphia, PA. And the sheepskin was in it when it was found. The thing we don't know and it also was addressed to a guy named Sewell F. Rugg. Sewell F. Rugg, it turned out, Carol and Skip White was sitting in the Historical Society building, and he said, oh, Sewell F. Rugg lived in my house. And so at that time, when that map came back to town, if that envelope was actually what it came in, it came to Sewell F. Rugg. I went back to see who Sewell F. Rugg was, and he was town clerk during that period of time.
Makes sense.
And for 11 years. And then I said, well, who is this guy? And then I went back and I started looking up his name, and when I looked up kind of genealogy stuff on it, it took me to this John White's genealogy. And somehow Sewell F. Rugg is in Skip White's genealogy somewhere, somehow. I don't think, he didn't tell me that, but somehow Sewell F. Rugg is in the White genealogy. Anyway, just another point of...
I just want to say thank you, David, for this series. It's been tremendous.
Thank you.
So also, we have a few refreshments over on the other side of the hall. We have some very nice homemade chocolate chip cookies for compliments of Donna Roscoe and a few other things, water. And be sure to look at all of these maps if you're interested in them. Silent auction is what we're doing with some. And there's other pieces of interest here, so take your time to take a look. And thank you for coming.